Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Yeah, doing good. Thanks. Thanks for joining me today on the show. I'm really excited to have this conversation and explore with you some of the things you've shared. Uh, like I said, looking forward to it. But just to give us an idea, or do you mind getting into a little bit about yourself and sharing with the listeners who you are and what's brought you here today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to be here as well. So thanks for having me. I'm an entrepreneur. I would say almost accidental a bit. And my story is in about, it was about 2017. I started a consulting business and it was random. I fell into this baby product sales market when I moved to New York in 2010. And it normal, good business, nothing really too exciting about it, I would say. And I started this consulting business. I wanted to get out of being an employee. I started my business, really started having a lot of stress. I knocked my blood pressure, a start medication, and I just really was feeling anxious and depressed because of
Mhm.
the stress that I was under. And it started to get disruptive to my life. I started having panic attacks. Like I said, I actually wound up in the hospital 2 times thinking I was having a heart attack,
Mm.
and it sent me down a path of uncovering what was going on. And I realized after many doctor visits, I finally ended up in a neurologist's office, and he said, "Matt, I've seen this a million times." He was like the rudest guy ever, so it's even funnier. He was just like, "Don't ever come back here. You don't need me. This is plain old anxiety, and go see your therapist or go see somebody else. Don't waste my."
Mhm.
It was liberating. uh, It was liberating that I wasn't dying. That was great news. But I was already in therapy. I was already in yoga, meditating, doing acupuncture, and so it meant doing more of the same things. And I continued down the path and realized that I had a childhood trauma that had not been realized, that I had not acknowledged. And at the time, I could have told you about my childhood in 2 paragraphs. Literally didn't remember much. And so for the past 7, 8 years now, I have been on a healing journey. I would consider myself nicely healed, but fully healed. I don't know that we're ever fully healed. I think when you're on a healing journey like I'm on, it really it turns into a growth journey,
Mhm.
and you start to learn the power and beauty and excitement and amazingness and ongoing forever growth. And that's my story.
Yeah.
Through my healing, I actually grew my business to make myself $1 million a year the past few years, which is remarkable. I come from a very blue collar family. I never thought this would be the case for me. And really, no one gave this to me. It was me having to negotiate and advocate for myself and learn my worth. I have always been a stellar employee, a stellar, contributor to society. And I didn't know what I was worth. And I really care a lot about equality and about cost of living is just absolutely insane. Even $1 million isn't not what it used to be. I don't want to sound like it's not, but just the cost of living is ridiculous high now, and I
Yeah.
really believe that people need to understand their worth. And I mainly am speaking to the high achievers out there that are undervalued. And so yeah, uh, through this journey, I started this business, and it was really based off of scarcity. I was very afraid that I would end up under a bridge, living, not able to afford my life, and don't recommend living your life driven by scarcity, but it was what it was. And now I've been called to purpose driven work and want to help other people grow and learn what I.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I appreciate it. So there's many ways I want to go about this because you've touched on childhood trauma, you've touched on worth, you've touched on scarcity. So I want to tie it all together and you and I have also chatted, so I have a bit of an understanding of what potentially was leading to that childhood trauma or some of those patterns that you were perhaps encountering as an adult that were coming back and leading to that anxiety as you described it. But let's touch on the worth, because that sounds like something that you've tried to heal. And how does that relate to your childhood?
I just always thought something was wrong with me. Growing up, I was always a sensitive kid, and I hated sports, and I still hate sports. I will go to a Super Bowl party for the food. I enjoy the food. I don't mind watching a little bit of it. I'm exaggerating now, but I my parents had me in sports thinking that would be good for me. I showed no talent whatsoever, and I hated it. I just hated
Yeah.
everything about it. And so that really made me feel like something was wrong with me, and big risk with my family because I was so uncooperative. At school, I did not fit in, and I'm gay. And around fifth grade, I had a group of guy friends, boyfriend, not boyfriend, got male friend,
Yeah.
and they realized something was different about me. I was realizing something was different about me, and they abandoned me. Don't say that they're kids. That happens. I'm not saying that they ruined my life, but um, I was so shameful that I hid this. I don't think that anyone really knew that this was the case for me. And I just covered it up and held it all inside. And honestly, I'm 41 years old almost right now. It was like I, I'm writing a book about my journey of healing, and I'm working with a writing coach. And it was like, I remember maybe 3 years ago that I had a really hard time, like even confessing to her about the shame and just like the devastation that I felt. So I was, 10, 11 years old, and I held it in for 25 years. So school was really difficult for me. I was I've always been intelligent and smart, so I did well academically, but I literally didn't have a single friend for 4 years of my entire 5th grade through ninth grade. Never once invited to a birthday party, went home after school every day, going to a friend's house. And I acted out because of it. There was a lot going on at home, a lot of overwhelming chaos in the house, and I acted out, and I was punished for it, and I just continued to believe more and more that something was wrong with me. And I have compassion for parents that have
Yeah.
kids who are acting out. I think especially back then, I think we didn't know that we need to when a kid's acting out, generally, I'm not an expert on this, but I would imagine an expert would agree that there's probably something deeper than them
Yeah.
misbehaving bad child. And I was, but at the same time, I was extremely helpful. I did chores. A lot of it was self-regulation or regulation. If I needed something to do to keep myself from feeling miserable, and started helping my parents, my grandparents, and doing like adult chores, cleaning, massive cleaning projects, mowing the lawn for the neighbors, helping them pay bills, just really adult things. I didn't really have a childhood at all. I Part of that was like I was just different. I didn't really play with toys. And now it's very funny because like it was 7, 8 years ago. Like I remember thinking I had no hobby. Like literally 8 years ago wasn't, but I had no hobbies. Now if I look at myself, I haven't been bored in 5 years. Like I
Mm.
could hours and hours. I cook, I garden, I practice yoga, I work out, which is just so funny. I'm probably like the most athletic in my family, but it's not from competitive sports.
Right.
I hike, I run, I go to the gym. But yeah, my story is not completely unique.
Yeah.
My had trauma growing up that was never acknowledged and treated either. And I don't like I didn't really know that mental health was a thing. Like growing up, I had allergies so bad. I'd never seen anybody in my life like this. Literally, I would like I go to school with my pocket, like mounds of tissues in there and just nose red sneezing every 15 seconds for hours and then be sent home. I'd fall asleep at my desk sometimes because like I'd take like Benadryl or Dimetapp at the time. And I've never seen anybody like this. And recently I had allergies. I don't really have them anymore. And I was like, oh my God, this is like 5% of what that was. And I felt like
Right.
tired and fatigue. And I'm like, oh my God, like this was my life. I felt horrible. And
Mhm.
I just, growing up, my dad always said, unless you're like got the flu or something, there's just no reason to let that, you know, I didn't know you were supposed to feel good. And that really translated to my career. I graduated college. I got a job at 15 and just worked at mall jobs, the normal. And then I got a hospital, like doing a super serious job. I was doing this during college, like carrying bodies to the morgue and watching heart monitors. And it was like, still even looking back, like probably one of the
Mhm.
hardest I've ever had. But yeah, like I went from that and then I sold metal after college. You wouldn't imagine that metal is used for so much, but there's construction,
Yeah.
cleaning, fabrication. It's crazy. But a lot. It was a decent, nice people, but like it was just like who wants to sell metal when they're like, out of college?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just really my whole life, like not ever like just thinking something was wrong with me. Like I looked around me at myself and I saw people at work who were happy and like most of them were happy-ish. I mean, everyone would rather have it be a weekend than a weekday when you're, when you're 20.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Feel as out of place as I did. And I just always thought something was wrong with me. And that really was the basis of the self-worth issue. I mean, I literally like in my head, like now when I think back to the first, 30 years of my life, I just always thought something was wrong with me. I was you like when I was being punished. What's wrong with you? You're
Right.
but yeah, and it's weird. Like on the outside, like when this mental health situation of mine was at its worst, I looked really good on the outside. I see pictures of myself. I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't eating like that much. And like I was working out, but I looked good for a while. I was losing my hair. I see pictures of myself. Hair was absolutely almost gone from the stress of going through. But yeah, I think everybody thought that how bad could things be from that? And I thought, how bad could they be for me also? On the outside, I looked fine. And I think a big part of the childhood trauma too was like, it's very difficult. I think when you have a horrendous experience, there's a general, it's a little easier, I think, to admit that was bad. But I grew up in a home with love. I grew up in the house was very clean. There was always food on the table. There was Christmas gifts. And there was a lot of chaos and stress and overwhelm and things that happened to me as a kid that weren't appropriate. No,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. No, appreciate that. And I think what you're describing there with the home life, very similar to your own adult life. Like you said, on the surface, everything seems fine and great. But it's when you look below the hood, there's all this stuff happening that's not necessarily being dealt with or talked about. So I think that's where, unfortunately, that's where we function as a society too. And now you've added this layer of social media where people have these superficial lives. Everything looks great, but what's going on below the surface, we don't know. And it's easy to compare based on the external metrics, and we tend to fall into that trap. And then with your childhood, you touched on, again, being forced to play sports and then having that abandonment issue with your friends. I think at the end of the day, whether you're a child or an adult, we all want to be seen and heard and understood. And you weren't being heard or seen, right? You were being forced into sports. Your friends didn't understand you, so they abandoned you. So when we tend to act out as children, that's what it is. It's a call for help. It's a call to be seen and understood. And because we don't have the language or the understanding to be able to express ourselves, that And sometimes we don't even learn that as adults. It's hard to be like, hey, mom and dad, I'm struggling here. I just want you to understand me or see me or help me out. We will act out, and that's our way of getting attention, which doesn't help, right? And as parents, we tend to personalize it. Why is my child misbehaving? Why is he doing that? Must be a bad child, right? And trying to, rather than trying to understand, okay, what's going on? And like you said, it's a generational thing. We obviously have way more knowledge today, so we can at least have a better understanding. Now, I know you touched on your father and some of the things he would say to you, especially as you were struggling with some of those allergy issues. How was your relationship with your father? And again, this is contextual because you've shared some of that with me offline, but how was that relationship, and what have you been able to do as part of your healing work to improve that relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. Just, I have to comment on the kid thing. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I mean, I'm just like always shocked as an adult reading something out and being like, God, like when you're like 10 years old, you have such a limited perspective of the world. You literally, there's no possible way that any 10-year-old has the, or even a 20-year-old has the ability to know what people like you and I do now. And honestly, when we're twice our age too, we're going to look back at us in our age that we're at now and think the same thing. My relationship with my father has been very contentious, I would say. I love him and he's taught me a lot. He was very he was very fiscally responsible, and a big part of my success in life and financial life is because of him, because he taught me how to invest money. So my grandma always gave us money for Christmas, and he made me save a lot of it and invested some of it in stocks for us, and it sucked being like 10 years old and you can't but you can't spend, but I mean, it was the right thing to do on it
Yeah.
really. And on the same hand, like, there wasn't like there's a lot of financial trauma that happened. My parents were very fiscally responsible, but they really set an example, or at least the way that I interpreted it was like, don't enjoy today very much. Save the money for tomorrow. You never know what's coming. That's probably been one of the biggest accomplishments in my life. It's really been only the past like 2.5 years that I've really just, I get the picture of like diving, I'm like diving off a cliff or something right now, just like really being able to enjoy my life, and being responsible enough. But
And do you feel that's where the scarcity also comes in from? Like
oh
I know
yeah,
you touched on, yeah.
and the thing was, my grandmother had money, and there was money, and this was like we weren't like poor, but we
Yeah.
grew up. We never went on a airplane as a family, or there was never there was like yeah, very tight budget, and then there were things there wasn't there was money for things that the outside of our house was very beautiful. So there was money for new flowers in the spring, but like when it came to back to school shoes, it was like you just get one pair for the year, which isn't the worst thing. It goes deeper than the shoes. It's just there was just never extra money for anything. And I get
Mm.
it, but it's just I'm at peace with it now, but sad.
Sure.
And like I have friends that have kids now, and they're like, "Oh, like we bought him this like Lego thing, like a Target on a Saturday just for no reason." Yeah, and generally we'll buy him something like once a week, and I'm like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
there that." There was never like any sort of, I don't wanna say it was never provided, but it was just, if it was, I felt the stress of it, like, very much to the point where, like, the you wouldn't ask for it because it would just would you would be very clear on what the sacrifice was. And my father, I love him, and I'm not sure what the rest of, assuming he assuming I outlive him, I'm not sure what the rest of his life looks like in terms of us. We don't really have much of a relationship, I would say.
Mm.
About 4 years ago, my parents and I had a pretty big falling out, and it was very sad. I'm sure it was very sad for them as well. It was very sad for me. they all had each other, and I was very much like on my own. This was during COVID, but right before COVID started. About 3 years, we went without seeing each other, talking to each other. I didn't get Christmas gifts for a couple of those years, or he didn't reach out my birthday or anything like that. And that's, I think, like the turning point for me. I've done so much work on myself that I do understand shame. I am like, I have so much empathy and I totally get what's going on. But on the same hand, I feel like I know I've been the bigger person in terms of repairing arguments and things like that when I was way younger. And I'm just fatigued by it. Not even fatigued. It's just me with being a leader at work. My job is the leader. And if something's wrong, I need to be the one to mend it.
Mhm.
Somewhat given up. I see him once in a while, but not, we don't really have much of a relationship. And I think I've made peace with that. And it's sad, but on the same hand, it's been so liberating just to stop. I don't know. I don't know what like the book would say on this
Yeah.
exactly. I just feel like I made so much peace by stop wishing things were different than they were. And I've literally spent like well over $100,000 on healing. I spent thousands of hours on and therapist chairs, read hundreds of books. Like
Yeah.
I don't think he's even read one book about or anything.
Mhm.
And but like on the same hand, if he needed anything, like I'd be here for him. But that's the thing, like our family, and this was a generational thing. I think that my parents prepared for their retirements and their end of life care as well. There won't be much need for me. I will never have to give them money or anything like that.
Mm. Right.
Um, it's interesting. My partner and we are starting our surrogacy journey. I'm not sure how much you know about it. It is incredibly a a privilege that we've been financially successful enough to afford it, but it's a down payment on a house, maybe in
Yeah.
more areas. And it would be nice. I wish they would. It would be nice if there was some help with that, but I'm just with the place a little bit where I just think how they are, and it's probably my biggest area of sadness, though. At the same time, I don't really most authentic relationship. My mom and I have gotten closer, but there's a lot of stuff that's off the table, I would say.
Yeah.
And, she's grown a lot, like, a lot, but there's just still for me, there's a lot of things that are just off the table. I'm just not really willing to risk going there because it's been so unsafe for so long, and
Yeah.
we'll see how things go, but I think that I'm a big fan of stoicism, and I'm not exactly 100% well-versed in this, but I think it could be said that at its most base form or most basic message of stoicism is really learn what you can control and what you can't, and there's so much freedom in that, and every area of my life is I'm implementing that in every area of my life and controlling what I can and controlling what I can't.
Yeah. No, for sure. Again, thank you for sharing that. And what I'm really hearing, and your in terms of the reference you made to stoicism as well, is just having acceptance for what is, right? And at the same time, to your point, in terms of what you can control, you've gone in, sought out the help, tried to heal the past. And there's that aspect in terms of the relationship with your parents, specifically with your father, that you've tried all you can, but at the end of the day, that's all you can control. And I'm wondering, like, how much, what, like, when you, I'm assuming you came out to them and told them you're gay. How did that impact that relationship? Or the relationship was already fractured from childhood that this was just one more thing?
Yeah, just I wanted to comment on the trying everything I can because I just if anyone's listening and can learn from this, I think that's been a big part of this. I don't know that I've tried everything I can, and I think that's been probably the biggest area of confusion, guilt, shame on my end, and also peace. maturity and to make a decision on something. I think that's what trauma does to you. Like, I'm gonna say something about this. I think that I remember this big epiphany I had, like when I was taking the break from my family, and I would just and I'd ask myself hundreds of times, why don't like why doesn't someone who's been like viciously attacked, why do they stay with that person? And I never and one day I got some validation from a very close person just in terms of what I remembered about my childhood. And I remember they don't realize what they went through was abuse. And that really set the stage for me in terms of how I approach things. And I still think there's a lot for me to unpack about my childhood and outside the home. I don't want to I think my home life was probably better than a lot of people's for sure, but it's really a symptom of just generational trauma that's not been healed, and we think that we can just bury it and it won't go anywhere. It goes somewhere. You're angry. You are unreasonable. You have your crap that you take out on your family, what you're avoiding. And so I think that I always thought something was wrong with me. Oh, my dad and I can't get along the way that I see other dads getting along with their kids. And no, I'm not sure that I've done everything I can, but I think at this point I'm having to like take an educated guess. I hope I'm doing the right thing, and just I think the ball's in his court, at least at this.
Yeah.
And I can answer the gay question in a second, but I
Yeah.
want to.
No, no. Yeah, I do want to come back to that in terms of what do you feel like you can do further?
I don't know at this point. I could keep trying. Oh, hey,
Mhm.
do you want to try to have a conversation? And that might end with a bigger fight. That might
Mhm.
end with me just holding in what I need to say. And it's not like that I am like the least prideful person in the world. I can, so it's not about the pride. Literally, I
Yeah.
couldn't have pride with this kind of stuff that I
Yeah.
do. But it's just, it hurts me. It's not that it even hurts. It's that me keeping it inside is again what I said. It's not going anywhere. So it's just, I don't, so if an argument happens or something is said that I choose to not retaliate with or not react to, then I'm going to be spending time and money in therapy trying to work through it that I'm just not sure or I'm going to be an asshole to my partner because I'm bothered by
Right.
something.
Yeah.
So I think
There,
go ahead.
there's an aspect of worth too, right? Like you shared, and that's something you've had to work on. And sometimes you have to set boundaries and recognize that, to your point, yes, you can keep trying, but at what cost to yourself, right? And then there's this other element of forgiveness, and you can forgive the other person without having to talk about it too, right? And sometimes in order to get there to forgive someone else, we have to forgive ourselves. And that's where that shame, that's where we get stuck too, that we're unable to forgive ourselves. And that's why it's so hard to let go and continue to go back, that maybe if I can get this validation, then I feel like it's good.
Yeah. I don't feel like that at all anymore. I've forgiven and truly I don't have any animosity for childhood. I have some disappointment for now.
Mm.
Like these words came out when I was writing my book, and it was like I just always thought like there'd be a reward for being a compliant child, for just like accepting the way things were. And now that there's my parents are retired, money is not a problem at all anymore. I just thought they'd be like, oh, like we're finally buying the vacation home and we're gonna do this now. And that's not coming.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like disappointing that there's not like more of an interest in my life, I would say. But no, I think my dad,
Mhm.
kind of crazy. I mean, I'm 40 years old starting a family, and it's like, God, I couldn't imagine doing it 25 years old. I mean, you know, and it's weird because we're at an age right now where people are having kids later. I am like, I still have the energy, but I am really afraid. Like people drop dead sometimes when they're 50. It doesn't really happen when they're 30.
Right.
I hope I don't drop dead. But on the other hand, like I'm so much smarter and more able to be a parent than I would have been 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So take the good with the bad. But yeah, I think that I think I've definitely forgiven and just I think and I'm it's probably one of the I'm quite proud. I feel that in my heart. b- Forgiving someone that doesn't ask for forgiveness is quite the quite the accomplishment. I'm pretty proud of
Yeah.
myself. Yeah, and it's a process. Like I remember, like somebody asked me, "Wa- "Was there a point where this all clicked?" No, there was not a point. Just one day you wake up and you're like, "This doesn't really bother me as much," and then a year later you wake up again and you're like, "I don't really even think about this anymore," and then a year after that, it's I literally just anymore.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah. I do want to come back to the other question and see how that affected the relationship in terms of coming out. And again, was it always problematic and this added to it, or didn't really have an effect?
My writing coach said this to me. She's a heterosexual woman. She's about my age, and she went to school in New York. And she said to me about 2 years into writing the book, she was like, "Matt," she was like, "I don't know that you really acknowledge like how hard it is being gay." She's like, a lot of gay friends, growing up, and like they really seemed like they struggled. And my being gay experience is been very interesting. I've been very proud gay person. I have probably hid it a little bit more than some,
Mhm.
not a lot, but a little bit more. I had a lot of straight friends in college and even in young adulthood. They were all accepting of me. It's really been a proud thing for me that most of my straight friends, I was their first gay friend. And it's also interesting. I had friends in college and they came and went more or less. And I still really am like my core friends, most of them are just a couple of newer friends, but half of my core friends are people I've known for 20 years. And you've seen like straight men. I have a lot of straight male friends, and it's been like really beautiful to watch them like go from, I don't want to use the word tolerance, but for lack of a better word, tolerance, to go from tolerance to like total embrace and like almost, I don't know if I want to say envy, but I think that there's a level of vulnerability that I have that I think that I've been
Right.
able to help them learn to the embrace of their own. I didn't tell it's being gay. I didn't really come out until I was like 18. I probably started telling friends, a few friends.
Right.
Then I didn't tell my mom probably until 25, maybe around 25. My brother is gay as well. He's younger. He told my mom before I did. And I told her, she responded fine. I never felt like I wasn't loved, but she was religious and she's then not as religious. And I have compassion for the situation. I think that she did the best she could. And honestly, they didn't know anybody gay. Oh, so I never felt unloved. I never told my dad. I did, and it's weird. It's just, I just never did. And I'd love to know exactly what was going on in my 25-year-old brain that prevented that. There was fear, I know. And when it's been brought up that he was disappointed about that, but I have a lot, along with the forgiveness of him, I have a lot of forgiveness of myself and peace with it. I didn't tell him because we couldn't get along I was afraid then.
Okay.
And I'm 1,000% at peace with that. And I
Okay.
wasn't, man, I was just like, we can't have a conversation about something way less serious. And I'm not putting my heart in the line here.
Yeah.
But
And was he disappointed with the fact that you didn't tell him, or the fact that you came out?
no, my dad's actually been totally supportive. He's
Yeah.
met he's my dad, honestly, is totally fine. I feel like I don't think he ever had a problem with it at all there, which kudos to him for that also. I have a lot of compassion for him, but no,
Yeah.
I never felt anything from him. I just never talked to him about it. My mom, I think, had a harder time because of the religion piece, and it's so different now. And I live in LA. I lived in LA and New York, and I don't my partner reminds me that it's not like this everywhere. And it's
Yeah.
really hard for me to believe. I believe it, but it's hard for me to think about that because it's just so embraced in New York and in California. But even compare apples to apples and growing up in California then or LA, like they're like being gay in school was not really okay. In college, I went to UC Riverside and there was like still I don't remember seeing hardly any gay people. I went to the gay club thing not the gay dance club, like the gay community club thing one time. There was like 8 people or something out of a school that had, I don't know how many there were, probably like 30,000 or 20 or 40, I don't know, something big. But now it's just, I think that people have our parents, us as parents, like we've had so much exposure to it that it's just like second nature. And gay people were to be feared back then. And I think we all know now that I mean, I don't really see too many gay murderers on TV. And that we're the, I don't think we're not the ones that are causing the problems in the world right now. I don't think so. I would say that, like, my parents love my partner and everything. I don't feel anything like other than that, but I would just say that I, I don't think, I think it would be, I think they would, I think it would be still easier for them if I was straight. I think they just don't no one's ever really asked me like, "Hey, this must have been hard for you." I've never gotten any sort of or probably, just not thinking about it. But,
Right.
I don't know, I'm a big reader. I buy a book when I'm wondering something. There's a lot of books out there that'll, provoke thoughts about what it's like for a gay kid. And I've talked to my gay friends now that are this was really one of my most riveting conversations. It was one of my best friends, and him and I were talking about it, and we were saying we both got to the same point of we only told our parents when we knew it was like when we knew we didn't need them for anything. Enough to know that if they were like, "Don't ever come home," that we would be like, "Okay." We had, which is sad. And,
Right.
like, I don't know if my mom listens to any of this stuff, but, like, I mean, like, there's no anger. Like, I would love this has been my life. I know she doesn't want me to hurt ever, and I know that if she heard stuff like this, I think she would I might think it would surprise her, but yeah, I mean, I would say that I've definitely I struggled with suicide and everything, and that shouldn't be the way that everybody like, the way that you feel for being marginalized, and
Right.
not just sexuality, everyone who is marginalized feels like that. And
Yeah. No, I agree. It is a tough spot, and you're trying to make sense of so many things, and it's hard to at times. But now that, as you've shared, you're starting your own family, what are some things that you're hoping to, through your own experience, share with the child that you guys are going to bring into the world? And as a parent, what are you hoping to accomplish and pay it forward in that sense?
so that's a good question. I don't mean to let me clarify my reaction right now. I'm saying that I think that this is probably gonna be a lot harder than I imagine. I think my partner and I we've been in couples therapy for a very long time. We've done a lot of work on ourselves. We're also older. So I do think that we are pretty well prepared for things. I think we also understand this isn't going to be like there's a lot of stuff that happened. And we're having one child. My cousin actually, it was a really good example. I was very close with her growing up and she wanted to have 3 or 4 kids, and then she had one and was really honest about it, and I this is all I can handle. And she's a fantastic mom, but it was like, my anxiety, like this, I worry, like I just so I think we're very aware of what we could handle. And like I really want to be a dad and like to do bath time and stuff like that. But I think we're both very aware that we do need another set of hands around the house
Yeah.
sometimes to help out. And if not, then we're just going to be arguing more. But we both work out. I'm okay working out a little less, but this stuff is all for mental health and for us to be cohesive. And I think there's just a lot less. I think that a lot of like what I see from families that struggle from things that have happened in my family, they're like my family, there's so much, and this stems from my grandparents and their grandparents and their parents and everything. But it was like there was so much martyrdom and so much
Right.
like, everyone always having to take care of other people's feelings and other people's problems and no boundaries that were fair. My partner and I will say, if he comes home from work and if I'm like not able to talk, I'll say, I don't want to talk right now. And that's not a mean thing. He can tell me
Mm.
that. I don't think that people do that very often. It's, oh, your partner. I don't want to hear about your workday right now. I don't mean to say it like that. It's like,
Right.
hey, I have had my own day right now and I can't wait to have dinner with you in 20 minutes, but I am chilling out right now. And I think that we have the ability to really do that. But you asked me this question originally, what really came to my mind first. And I'm a big Oprah fan, and Oprah wrote a book a few years ago with Dr. Bruce Perry called What Happened to You.
Yeah.
And have you read that?
Yeah.
There was it was like the first book I found it recently and it highlighted all over. It was the first book I ever colored like that. But I think I'm very aware of my partner read it too also. Just very aware that all of these things, fighting, all of this stuff, like your kids see it, your kids hear it. What stood out, the first thing was like, apologize to your kids. And I think Oprah says that. I think that was like a huge thing that she said a while ago. And it's just apologized. Glennon Doyle, she's an author. She's one of my favorite authors ever. I think she's a fantastic mom. She is not perfect, but she is like, you just don't bury things. You apologize. You admit when you don't know what you're doing. You come back and you say, I'm sorry that I reacted this way. She has a drug and alcohol background when she was younger. Being honest with your kids about that stuff. And I look at like my history with alcohol and how I have definitely used more of it than I would like to have used it. I It's funny. I never knew it was bad for my health. I realized that, but it was like shame. And my parents' story was they both grew up with alcoholic parents of some variation. But my parents did not drink at all, so they really skipped that, which was a huge blessing. So that was really nice that they skipped that. But they made me feel like the only reason why you don't drink is because it's bad or something. Thing. And I guess I never really knew like college when I was taking shots all the time, like that was like harming me. I guess maybe I thought my liver or something, but it's like it's your heart, it's your brain, it's your lungs, it's all of this.
Right.
And I think like teaching, just being honest with your kids and it, I think a big thing is like the overwhelm and just like like for us, like we live in Los Angeles, we have a very expensive house payment, and I still struggle with the scarcity issue
Yeah.
with scarcity and just worrying about money. It's so much better than it's ever been. But we're literally just deciding to pull the trigger on this surrogacy thing right now. And one of the condolences we really had to make to like, or I guess I said it, more in charge of our financial, like, we're worrying about it, I guess. I'm the
Yeah.
worrier. And like, worst comes to worst, like, we would move to a different state. I love California. Taxes here are very high. I'm cool with it more or less. But if things got really bad, I mean, we would just have to move somewhere.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it, solution to problems. It's not it's not so rigid. Like that's gonna be like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and you touched on apologizing to children, and I think there's many layers to it with respect to that because I've talked about that as me being a father too. First of all, you're creating an avenue for your child to then be able to express themselves. They feel like they don't agree with something. They feel like, okay, if I'm going to share that with my parent's not going to get defensive because they're open to the feedback. So that's one aspect of it. Then the second thing is you're also role modeling for them that it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I remember growing up, and it sounds like you had somewhat a similar experience where you look at your parents and they put on this persona that they're not allowed to make mistakes. And if you try to point it out, then you're in trouble. There's that one layer too. And also you're role modeling for your children that when you do make mistakes, you can apologize and move on from it. Right. And it's not one of those things where it's the big elephant in the room that you don't talk about. And that's how I felt at times as a child too. And then I guess one last question in terms of parenting compared to a heterosexual couple, do you foresee any other challenges with being parents? And is that something you guys have talked about or even, I know it's one of those things you can get into it when it starts, but yeah, I'm just curious if that's something you've thought about.
It's so funny. I think sexuality right now, I don't even understand
Yeah.
sexuality right. There's a lot going on in the world with identity and sexuality,
Yeah.
and I don't know that anybody really has this figured out or knows
Yeah.
what's going on, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory way at all. People are expressing themselves in ways that we've never seen, and this is happening
Yeah.
very and I have, like, straight male friends that are wearing nail polish. I have I mean, it's just that's where, like, that would never have happened, like, probably
Right.
literally was 5 years ago, like, a straight male would have never put nail polish on. Like, it just so to answer your question, I'm sure that there will I'm sure that there will be obstacles, but I see sexuality in general just being an obstacle, and not a bad obstacle, a learning let me rephrase that. I see sexuality being a situation we are all having to,
Yeah.
uh, grow and adapt to and learn, just continuous learning as time goes on. Who knows? Like, interesting, like, in 30 years right now, will the majority of people not be monogamous? Will the majority of people be gay? Will the majority of people be polyamorous? We literally don't. Right now, I think the one thing we can say for sure is that, sexuality is probably way different today than we ever would have thought it would be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. But I did wanna just say one more thing about the, apologizing thing because we both read the
Yeah.
Dr. Ruth Marie Oprah book. It was I think that the thing that really floored me was where they talked about respect, like respecting your kid. That was really new for me. And I think it was probably I don't think that kids were respected until this generation right now. Ever. I'm sure you grew up hearing something similar of, "I'm the adult, you respect
Yeah.
me." I struggle with that word respect, like, not even just with parents, but even in even in business setting, I think respect needs to be earned. I would think there's a general thing, I'm not gonna tell somebody above me to screw off, but I wouldn't
Sure.
tell want me to do that either, honestly.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I wouldn't tell anybody to do that. I guess I just heard myself say that, and yeah, I wouldn't tell someone above me or below me to do that, and I don't really if anything, I have a more authentic relationship with people at work that are below me than people that are above me. People that are above me are like me and vulnerable
Mhm.
and didn't take feedback. But a lot of time, respect is like just you're telling someone what they want to hear and not have a conflict. Not, I don't,
Unhealthy.
that's what I need to do. I'm a mature person and it's, it's getting in the way of authenticity.
Yeah, and I think what you're referring to, and often growing up, it felt like there was a hierarchy system in the house. And what we really need to do as parents or adults is treat children as equals and not create that hierarchical system. And that's where they, again, they feel seen and heard. Otherwise, they feel like, okay, I'm to be compliant or submissive and just do what as I'm told, and that's not healthy for the child's development in the long run. And we see these issues as children grow up and they become adult. They struggle in their adult relationships because they don't have that confidence or the ability to express themselves.
Well, with rules, I think Brene Brown or somebody like would say something like, "You do have to explain that I am the parent. I'm looking out for you. There are going to be times that you're not going to be happy with, and but I hope that if you can just always start from the very beginning of having a respectful, even keeled demeanor when you're talking with your child, I would hope that goes pretty far. That I think the overwhelm is a big problem. I think, and I'm not saying that overwhelm doesn't happen, but overwhelm. If you and I get into an argument right now because I'm overwhelmed, and I'm above you in life or family, whatever it might be, you're gonna walk away like we're not thinking that I thinking that you're doing something wrong. It's eating away at you, or you're gonna. It's just the balance is not happening right. It's a two-way relationship. Maybe it's better to say more two-way than even than on than on the level field because I
Correct.
do like you get to have rules.
Absolutely. Yeah. But you have to have that avenue where they can speak about the rules too, right? If they feel that something's unfair, they should be able to at least express themselves. And then it's a conversation rather than thou shalt follow this.
Totally.
Yeah. Matt, this has been a great conversation. Thank you again for being so vulnerable and open about your story. Is there anything else you feel like we haven't touched on that would be of value to the listeners or that you would like to talk about and share?
Honestly, I think we've had a really enjoyable and full encompassing conversation. So I don't think there's anything in terms of the topic that we've missed.
No, I appreciate that. And if listeners want to get a hold of you or find some of your work, especially if you're writing, what are some ways they can do that? I know you wanted to share some resources as well.
Yeah. My website is mattgerlach.com. It's Matgerlach. I do a weekly blog, and I have something coming soon where I'm creating this pamphlet, this document, this workbook that is going to teach you exactly what I've learned about goal setting and going after my life, admitting what I've needed to admit about my past. So feel free to email me directly at mattgerlach.com, and I'll send that over to you when it's ready in a few days. I'd love to just keep in touch. And I offer one-on-one coaching right now. There'll be some group offerings coming soon, but I'm really an open book. And throw some time on my calendar. There's a link on my website to do that. No expectations. Would love to just chat with you and hear if there's anything that's going on that I might be able to be a resource for. Yeah, would love to
Yeah,
just stay connected with anybody who's inspired, curious, or that I can help.
sure. Yeah, we'll throw all that in the show notes. But Matt, thank you again. It was a pleasure talking to you and got a lot to learn about your life and what you've come through. So I appreciate all that.
Thank you. You too.